Okay, thank you all for coming tonight, and I hope that you've all had a great day, and grab something to drink. We'll take a couple breaks throughout the evening. Tonight is week 1, and it's the introduction to chaplaincy. And we'll be describing some of the different areas where chaplains work and give you an idea of some of the tasks and some of the characteristics that are important for a chaplain. So if you want to look at page 1 under week 1, because we'll be following the outline in your manual. So you can also take your notes. I've put some spaces on there, lines on, and you can take some notes next to it or on the page before or after, you know, if you run out of space, as well as your own paper, okay? So I'm really excited about this course because every time that I've taught it, I've learned something new about how to reach out to people. And my eyes have been opened, and I've gained some new skills. And a lot of people think that just because they've been doing something for a long time, I really have surprisingly encountered people who are licensed ministers or active in outreach, and they feel like, well, we studied one time, and then, you know, I've got everything I need to know. And it's like, that's why we offer the continuing education courses, classes, seminars, to help us refine our tools. The chaplain certificate is something that can open doors that a licensed clergyman, a priest, or a minister can't get into, because the government recognizes a need for spiritual involvement, spiritual development in people's lives, but they don't want a licensed minister. So a pastor can't get into certain places that a chaplain can, because they're affiliated with a religious organization. So a chaplain works in the secular world. And another thing about the chaplain certificate is you may be a person that you talked about visiting the hospital. You could go visit somebody in the hospital or someone in the jails or in hospice, or just sit down with a friend that needs a little bit of comfort and counsel. But a chaplain certificate, when someone says that they're a chaplain, they recognize that you've reached a certain, you had to do something to get it. It's like getting a bachelor's degree or a certificate in a vocational program. This is considered a vocational program. They recognize, and it gives that you've done some study and you had to earn that certificate, that you've done something, and it gives a person, especially a young lady or a young man, it gives you credibility, whereas if you were 70 years old, that people would figure, oh, you have a lot of experience, and they would look at you with, you know, you have a little bit of wisdom. But a doctor can be a young person, but because they've studied and been trained and developed skills, people recognize their authority, and it does give you a certain amount of recognition when you walk into certain situations. International Chaplaincy Training is part of the Educational and Development Department of New Life Christian Church, and it is a nonprofit organization, a 501c3 organization. Okay, so let's look at number 1 under week 1. It says the purpose of a community service chaplain, which is to provide spiritual guidance and practical service to the people of the community through a field of service ministry, a field service ministry. Okay, chaplaincy is often called a ministry of presence. Just having a spiritual advisor there is when a person is troubled, or in even something like when you're handing out an organization, a nonprofit organization that is handing out food or clothing to people. It shows, it's like you're like God on the spot. And also, the chaplains are out taking the love of God outside of church walls. Okay. ICT's vision statement: we are committed to train and mobilize an army of believers that will impact the world with the truth of God's Word by demonstration of love, in service to the needs of individuals, with humility and wisdom that is empowered by our faith in Jesus Christ. Now, some people would not even set foot in a church door. But you can take the love of God and show them how much Jesus loved us just by you going out and reaching out to the people around you. Okay. As I mentioned, this is considered a vocational training course. It's similar to like an electrician certificate. Okay. The role of a chaplain, page 2. Now I've got this divided into 3 different categories, and this is pretty much based on the tasks or responsibilities that are found in different groups of where you find yourself reaching out to people. You can be proactive, which is going out. There's a role of it as an administrative role in chaplaincy, where you're like a supervisory role. And then there's a reactive chaplain, where people are coming to you. Okay. A proactive chaplain makes themselves available to serve in the areas of official functions, like opening ceremonies, for example, community involvement, maybe in the Rotary Club, a PTO organization. We have a young man that he's not a certificated chaplain, but he went through the course, and it was partially so he could gain some training and credibility. But what Chris does is he gets food and clothing and does a lot of helping for young children in elementary age, and he does all kinds of activities and fundraisers, and so that's kind of he's out in the community. There's also the idea of visitation, which is something you've expressed interest. I know Henry has done a lot of that, where you can visit people that are shut-ins. You go to a hospital, you may go to a jail, and people find that when they're alone in that kind of a situation, that the comfort of a chaplain is very effective. Informal counseling. Once people realize that you have a little bit of spiritual foundation, and you're a chaplain, people might start coming to you and ask you for some advice. I often have people calling me up, asking me just, what do I think about this or that, and your knowledge of the Bible is very helpful. Well, I said this is not exactly a Bible course, but finding, so that kind of information is something that you'll have to do a little bit on your own for your personal devotional time. But like for example, the book of Proverbs is very, very practical in helping people organize and straighten out some very difficult situations. Chaplains are involved in volunteering. A lot of people like distribute food, do things with the homeless, that type of thing. Teaching, as and training, they kind of go hand in hand. A lot of times people's problems stem from a lack of life skills. And maybe they don't know about nutrition, or they need help. Some people just don't know how to manage a household, or health needs, just basic things about how to take care of your health. And also teaching different classes. There's a lot of like anger intervention, that type of thing that you can do. And that's a proactive. You're making yourself available and you go out to people. Now a reactive chaplain, that is it's similar but slightly different. You make yourself available in a crisis response situation. Okay, what happened? There's an event that happens and you're reacting to it. A crisis response, maybe somebody's house burns down. So they need somebody to be there right at that time. And they also can go hand in hand with crisis intervention. If they don't have a home, then we can use sources, and I'll give you a particular link for the county that you can look up, and it has a lot of different agencies and resources, organizations that you can access to help people. If you find somebody doesn't have enough food in their home, there's different areas we can help hook them up. But if you've getting back to the crisis intervention, if they've lost their home, or if they have a financial crisis, someone's lost their job and they need some immediate help, you can help step in there, find places where they can get food and shelter. Grief and loss support is probably pretty obvious. When someone has had, and we're going to learn a lot, we have a whole section on grief and loss, and then the next lesson week after that is a review, because most of people's problems stem from experiencing a loss of some type. And it's not necessarily a death, and we'll talk about that. It can be the loss of a job. And in 2008, the economy here in Michigan, well, everywhere plummeted, but particularly the car industry just kind of took a real tumble, and that had a cascading effect, a domino effect in a lot of the industries in the area, in Macomb County, for example, but in the Detroit metro area greatly. So a lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of businesses closed, and you find that for a man who is 50 years old, not able to support his family, or that their identity is often wrapped up in the fact that they worked at this job for 30 years. And here I am, I'm nobody, I can't earn a living anymore, I'm in danger of losing my house. And that's the kind of loss that people don't really think needs a chaplain, but you can really provide a lot of support in that type of situation. Okay. In regards to crisis response, it answers the needs of the moment and in a heightened emotional situation. The crisis intervention, you need somebody to step in. The situation has gotten out of hand, or it could be unsafe. For example, if someone becomes violent in the home and you need a spouse or a child or a teenager needs to get out of the home, and you need to step in and help them with that. Death notifications. That's usually more something in a more official capacity, like someone that might go, if you worked with the police, going on, but it also could be involved in a hospital visitation situation. And we'll do a little section later on, almost at the very end of the training, talking about doing how to do a death notification. As a chaplain, you can do a funeral, or a memorial service, or a baby dedication. Those are things that you don't have to be have some legal rights or responsibility. But you can perform different ceremonies. that people might be interested in. For example, you can't do a wedding ceremony because you're not a licensed minister with the county, okay? But you could do a renewal of vows, for example. If somebody has already been married and they want to just renew their vows, or if they've been legally married by a justice of the peace and they want just a commemorative religious ceremony, you could do that. And there are different books you can get to give you examples about different ceremonies, but as you get more experience and attend different things, I mean, you kind of can form your own outline based on your experience. Now, for example, a Catholic person that didn't belong to a church, you couldn't do a mass for them, but at a funeral home you could do some prayers or a memorial service for them. First response counseling. Often when people have had an emergency or a crisis, they need that emotional and spiritual support and in how to deal with these emergencies. And then also, it's very important follow-up when you've had an encounter with somebody to check back if, for example, if you found someone a shelter to stay at, if they had to escape from their home and you found a shelter, checking back with them and seeing what are they doing at that time. Do they need more help? Because normally those are emergency situations. How can you help them along? What's going on with them? Do they need more food? What kind of resources you can help hook them up with? And to see how the situation has played out. So follow up when you're dealing with someone is very important as well, because you may have someone that you work with may have experienced a death in the family, and so you may have even gone to the funeral home, or depending on what they're, had coffee with them. But 6 months down the line, most people have forgotten that person experienced that loss. But it's very reassuring to them that somebody cares when you check back with them to see how they're doing. Okay, and then an administrative chaplain on page 3, it's a kind of not hands-on with a lot of clients often. You're involved in developing programs, resources, helping organize, facilitate resource matching that's involved with, like when you sit down, and you might not do like a formal needs assessment, but you kind of sit down with somebody and see, well, they need that, and they could use this, and you kind of connect them with if they need a doctor or a babysitter or some kind of food programs. Administrative, supervising other chaplains, organizing and supervising seminars, establishing training for volunteers. You might raise funds for the nonprofit organization or to help provide resources, participate in public relations. I do a lot of that with just things on YouTube and Facebook and contacting people, and making presentations. Okay. On the internet, as I mentioned, the Right Connection in Macomb County is attached to the Macomb Intermediate School District. So I'll write that down, the Right Connection in Macomb County, and if this week you can take a look online. Did you get a booklet from them, Kathy?
I just have the information though.
Because somebody I thought it was you had talked about getting a booklet from somewhere. But the thing is, those connections, when they print something out,
It changes.
they change so fast and things close up that the internet is so very practical.
Mhm.
So it would be good to kind of take a look at some of the different divisions. They might have things for helping delinquent youth, mothers with small children, resources for them. It's a good resource. And I've got some things for Wayne County, because we've had different people in Wayne County that have brought us different resources to check on. Okay. Now, what kind of a person is a chaplain? When you're a chaplain, there's a certain amount of character that God is building in you, and these different traits are just some of our positive aspects, but God is always refining and improving on our character. I think that's one of the things that you may think you're honest, but as you go along and dealing with God and people, He'll expect you to become more honest. You may be compassionate, but He's going to work on you through different to test that and strengthen it, to help you to become more compassionate. So what an important thing is to be a person of faith. There are multi-faith chaplains. Chaplaincy originally was so limited to the Christian faith, and it began basically in medieval times with nobilities that they're on their estates, if you want to call them that, they would have their own religious person that they employed and ministered to their spiritual needs. Well, that was England and Europe, and that was basically Christian. But today you will find that the religious workers has expanded to all types of faiths. There could be Hindu or Muslim, or there's even atheist chaplains, because they may not realize it, but they have a spiritual need, and it is actually a belief system. Atheism is a belief system. So you need to have faith, and you need to be credible. People need to be able to say that you're a believable person, that you're upright. You need to be available. That's something that is very difficult, because it's not a 9-to-5 job. Mm-hmm. And especially if it's on volunteer time, you may have your regular work, but people's problems don't occur Monday through Friday, 9-to-5 all the time. So they may need some help with transportation, and it can be very taxing, but they need to know you're available to them. Now we'll get into that a little bit more down the line, but you do need to establish boundaries. Somebody doesn't need to call you up at 3 o'clock in the morning because they're out of diapers, right? I mean, they can find a 7-Eleven. They should be able to do that. But if there's a crisis situation, emergencies don't just happen 9-to-5. So sometimes it takes time to sit down and talk with somebody and just comfort them and reassure them and just be there. There's that ministry of presence. When in 1996, my daughter died. And there's really not much you can say to a person to really comfort them. But there was we were in Europe at the time, and there was just an overwhelming show of support and contact and even donations from the American, the English-speaking community, and just people being there for us. So that's one of the most, that availability, just being there for people sometimes can make all the difference when they're at their rope's end. Yeah, you need to be trustworthy. People need to, you're going into people's homes, they're vulnerable. We don't want to take advantage of them for our own gain. They have to be comfortable leaving their belongings around. Don't tell anybody what they're talking to you about. It's very important. They know that they can trust you. We need to be accepting. And sometimes that's very difficult. If someone that's very different from you comes along and or they have standards that you don't agree with, we are not there to impose ourselves on them. In order to help them, we need to receive people just as they are. And hopefully through knowing us that they'll be able to grow, but just so they know that they're received just as they are, whether they're dirty, whether they're educated, whether they're uneducated, whether they're rich, or whether they're poor. And then people need to know that we have a genuine interest in them. It makes a big difference if I'm showing that I care about you in your situation. And it's just not make me puffed up and feel good because I'm such a great person. Okay. Number 8, let's talk about faith. Okay. As a Christian chaplain, it's important to have a working knowledge of the Bible. Does that mean that you are able to look into the Bible and find different passages that can instruct them in how to live, that can provide comfort for them? For example, most people are familiar with the 23rd Psalm. But in different sections of your Bible, there often shows about different verses that you could share with people in when they're angry, when they're scared, when they're troubled, lacking peace. And so that's why the book that we're using, The Faith, is also helpful, because it also gives biblical support for the standard Christian doctrines that are found in the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed, which is what that book is describing, because those things are common beliefs found in the Christian denominations. And we need to be able to live out our beliefs. We need to have a consistent testimony. What does that mean? That my lifestyle reflects what I'm saying I believe. Am I honest? Do I talk down to people? Living it out shows how your faith works in real life. Okay? When you have your car gets stolen, or you get in a car accident, and people see how you trust God and how you can be at peace in the midst of a very troubling time, shows people who don't have faith how trustworthy God is. And it can be comforting to them that if God did this for you and brought you through this difficult situation, then He can also do that for them. When you're living out your faith, you show a confidence in life, that you know where you're going. You're not wandering around, because the Bible gives us direction. Okay? Walking in humility. that's so crucial to helping people. The opposite of humility is pride or arrogance. If we're coming across like, I know the answer, that I'm bigger, better, smarter than you, I got the answer and you don't know, they're not going to be, even if we're giving good counsel, they're not going to be able to receive it. Even if we're trying to love and support them in a difficult situation, they won't listen to you. Okay? When we're walking in our faith, we can extend the same grace and mercy that God gave to us, to them. When I understand that I was a sinner and God loved me anyways, and He sent Jesus to die for me, that makes me see that the person sitting next to me on the bus is just as able to receive that love and that mercy from God. And the Bible talks about what we've received freely, that we need to be able to give it out freely. When God has given us forgiveness and love and mercy, and we understand that to a certain degree, because, I mean, there's so much about God that we can't understand with our finite minds, but we can give back to the other people what God has given to us. I would say that as a chaplain, we're channels. You know, it's just like if you're thinking of like a pipe of plumbing, you know, and the water comes from a source. We're not the water, and water is basically life, right? Without water we can't live, but we're this tube, and God's life, God's water, His Spirit can pour out through us. Mm-hmm. And then when you're thinking about that, oh, I'm just this, well, now they're PVC, they're plastic pipes, they're not metal anymore, basically. But I'm just this piece of plastic that God's channeling His water through. That's, oh, you know, okay, I'm not such a hotshot after all. And I think inspiring hope is so important, because in our world today, so many people are without hope. And they don't have something that they can believe in. They don't have a promise. They're so negative. When you look around, when they're looking at the television, when they're looking at the internet, when you're looking at magazines and newspapers, there's so many crummy things happening all over the place. And I think what I've noticed in the last 20 or 30 years, that young people are so in such despair in a way previous generations were not, because they see so much tragedy in the world. Whereas when you didn't have the facility of instant notifications when there's a hurricane or a typhoon or an earthquake or a train wreck all over the world, and they look at the terrible conditions all over the world that previously we weren't as exposed to. There's a lot of young people that just, they really don't have anything to live for. The future is so bleak. And sharing what God's desire for man is so inspiring, so life-giving, that it's positive, and that there is a reason. And even in the midst of our tragedy, there, you know, you've got that old saying that there's, behind every cloud there's a silver lining, you know, and after the rain there's rainbows that just, you know, and they're just, the people, they just don't have the ability to dream. But by showing them God's love and what He says about their situation and the fact that He cares and the provision that He's made for us, we can give them hope. And this isn't just a mindless hope, a positive thinking, that everything's going to work out, because it doesn't always work out. But even in the midst of tragedy, there's still light. There's still good, because God is good. And that's how we can reflect and inspire hope and demonstrate His love. That's important, because a lot of people just lack love. And when we've received God's love and love from the body of Christ among ourselves, we can reach out and give that to other people. Okay. Credibility is the quality of being trusted or believed in. Okay. It usually has to be earned. People are not going to just trust us and believe in our genuineness, that we're really trying to help them without getting anything in return. And credibility involves walking in integrity. There's a lot of factors that enter into being an integral person. What kind of things do you think of if you think of somebody that has integrity? Question. If you consider somebody with an integrity, do you think they're honest? Do you think they're clean and moral? Do you think that they're living what they're saying?
Strong, confident person.
A confident person?
Confident.
Okay. A motivation for our integrity is that we're out in the world representing the King of Kings. So I think that colors how I behave. Not just that I'm trying to be a good person, because, I think I'm a pretty good person most of the time. But when I'm thinking that what I'm doing is showing what God is like, and that if I'm dishonest or immoral, that does reflect on our Lord. Okay? Integrity is having strong moral principles. And I think today there's not a lot of moral standards in the world. And it's always shifting. What's good now used to be considered bad. And people think that being a good person isn't relevant anymore. That if you're doing certain things or not doing certain things, you're old-fashioned. But there's a standard that we have that's God's Word, and that doesn't change.
Never changes.
When I got married 35 years ago, okay, yes, people did different, they had different lifestyles, okay? For example, we talked about homosexuality. At that particular time, people did not accept that as proper behavior. But as you see, today, they're calling things that God doesn't say is good for us normal and good. People have perverted love and intimacy between a man and a woman and taking it to degrading levels. People are calling pornography, especially child pornography, publicly they decry these kind of things, but yet the movies and the media always, it encourages a sexual interest in with children and experimentation that God desired in his plan. He created relationships with men and women, and he has a plan for that. So we need to be upright and without scandal, I guess you could say. Before as well, when I was a child, or even before, a politician had to have a clean record. If you had any kind of scandal or negative history, you were not able to be elected. Is that correct, Henry?
Yeah, that's correct.
And now,
Hands free for all.
yeah, I mean, they're just, and if you even look in the city of Detroit, you keep, or other cities, people just keep re-electing people that they know are crooks. And now they just, it doesn't matter if you're taking money or having affairs with your coworkers or that type of thing. They just accept that as normal because everybody does it. So you can see there's been a deterioration, but we can maintain just by,
Standing with God.
that's right, living our lives knowing that he's looking at us can show that there is something different about us and that they can trust us without judging them as well, because when you're dealing with people that are doing drugs and they're wife beaters and abusing children and all these different things, addictive behaviors, we have to love them and show them that by living right, it's a healthier way to live, all the way down, spirit, soul, and body. We need to be dependable. Oh, no, I skipped something. Demonstrate ethical behavior. Ethics is lacking in accountancy. And, people prescribe medicine that people don't need because they get money. Drug companies develop drugs that don't help, but they keep selling them to people. We need to be honest in our dealings. If I'm going to be if I enter into a contract to do a job for someone, then I need to uphold my end. If I say I'm going to do it in this amount of time for this amount of money, then I need to do what I'm going to say. And if it extends longer, then I'm not going to charge them more. I need to not try to up the price because, I need more money. Or even in our jobs, doing the work, 8 hours work for 8 hours pay. If I'm buying a car from somebody, okay, in my communications, I need to be truthful in my communications and honest in my communications and not hide things from people. Okay? And then, again, we're talking about being dependable. Doing what I say I'm going to do, following up. Making sure that the job gets done, that their needs are met, following through. If I say I'm going to go and I'm going to find some type of clothing that they need, or if I'm going to meet them there, it's not saying, well, something came up, I can't bring this food to you today. Making a way. Do what you say. Can you be relied on? Okay. Being available. You need to be committed to responding when you're needed. And that's sometimes inconvenient. I talked a little bit about setting boundaries. Okay. Some people that don't have regular schedules, they don't go to bed at a regular time, they don't get up at a time, they might not have regular jobs. It doesn't matter what time of day or night it is. So they could call you in the middle of the night because,
They slept all day.
yeah, because they slept all day and they just want to know what time you're going to pick them up that day. Well, that's, you need to be understanding, but you don't have to, you can be clear that this is, there's normal hours. But sometimes it means being inconvenienced. Sometimes it means when I plan on going shopping that I have to go sit with someone that's troubled. Or, help them find something that they're looking for, help find transportation. So sometimes it means being inconvenienced. As I mentioned, accommodating a client does not fit into a 9-to-5 Monday through Friday job. But if you have a family, if you sit down at your family dinner table, doesn't mean you have to answer the phone while you're sitting down at dinner. That's reasonable. You're saying if there's a committed family time, if you're at a child's, well, none of you guys have little kids, but your child's basketball game, that's an important time, that's blocked out for your family.
Right.
So people, you can say that, this is the time that I'm not available. Because often when you don't set boundaries, they want instant responses and whenever they want. And we need to help keep peace in our households, in our lives as well. So if I have to get up for work in the morning, sometimes it may be necessary for me to sit up late at night with somebody that's, had an accident and their child is in the hospital. But that's an emergency situation. I don't need to sit there and talk with somebody and talk with somebody and talk with somebody till 1 or 2 in the morning when it's non-threatening. You can set things up in a reasonable amount of time in a schedule. And I said, it can cut into your dinner time sometimes, and sometimes there are impromptu things, so you do have to be available, but there's nothing wrong with setting limits.
Boundaries go both ways.
Both ways, right. I have a lady that if I let her, she would call me and text me any time of the day or night. And sometimes she's distraught, and I do need to address the situation, even if it's 10 o'clock at night. But just because you're just got a little bit uneasy about something doesn't mean that I'm going to jump into my car and go meet you, because otherwise you lose your effectiveness as well. You're putting a strain on your personal life. So am I making that
Sure.
differentiating clearly the balance between being available but also helping to put things in a proper perspective? Because if somebody's up, has weird sleep patterns, and they don't sleep, they could expect you to be talking to them for an hour at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning. And you say, no, you're going to have to do it during other hours, right? Because it's not an emergency, right? When do people need you to respond immediately? When there's a crisis and trauma, when there are situations demanding immediate attention. If there's a medical emergency, or there are people that get so emotional that it becomes dangerous, or they just are losing control. So you need to intervene. Yes, ma'am.
I think what helps is the fact that because you're in the Bible and you learn the discernment, and Holy Spirit shows you too, and with boundaries, with connections, and with God, and with love, it balances, it all works out.
And there are crisis lines. So I have given out 24-hour numbers for people that are just, because I can't be there every day, every time somebody gets distraught and emotional, overly so, because it does reach a point where just talking to them, giving them a scripture is not enough. And there are people that need that every single day, because they're just not very stable. That the slightest thing is a catastrophe, and they just go just go into crisis mode. So it's kind of difficult to differentiate sometimes, because they may think it's an emergency, and it could, if it isn't de-escalated, turn into an emergency. So you have to kind of weigh things in the balance. How much can you give? How far can you go? If you're a single person, then there's a lot more liberty you have with your time. But if you're in relationships, if you have children, then there's other demands on your time. With your jobs, there's a demand on your time. Trust. You have to earn their trust. They've had people fail them so very often. They've had people let them down. They have been lied to, betrayed, cheated, and people do not open up very readily just to, and so you have to it depends too, as if it's a short-term situation, you don't have time to develop a relationship and show that you're trustworthy, that you're not going to lie about them, that you're not going to go talking about them. But you need to be people that are trustworthy. And when you're dealing over a period of time with people, and they see your consistency, then they develop your trust. One of the things is maintain confidentiality. Okay, when they're talking to you, they don't want to think that you're going to go blabbing their business to everybody. Okay, when you're teaching a class such as this, okay, if I'm using examples from real life, I need to be discreet about it. It's because my experience can be helpful, but we're not trying to expose people and their weakness. We're not exposing people to ridicule. Okay? In Proverbs 10:12 it says that love covers all sins. And that word for cover is not to hide it. Just but it's to clad or to clothe. So if you think about comparing, if somebody was naked and you're putting clothes on them to kind of protect and not expose their weakness. Okay? And so it doesn't mean to hide it and cover it up in the fact that you're just not letting anybody know about it, like you're trying to hide their bad behavior so it doesn't get out in public. Or you're not trying to excuse their behavior, but you're not making them ridiculed. Okay? The World English Bible says in Proverbs 17:9, he who covers an offense promotes love, but he who repeats a matter separates best friends. Okay, so that's that same idea of not exposing them. Because when you do, they'll feel betrayed. And that's the very opposite of the trust we want to have. Because many times, the effectiveness we have is people will listen, will start to listen and start to act on, because they know that they can trust us, that we're looking for their best interests. Okay? If somebody comes to me, a teenager, and they come talking about some of the bad things that they're doing, okay, that I'm not just going to run and tell their parents everything that they're talking to me about. If they're dealing with temptations or that type of thing, they need somebody they can rely on and trust. But if what they're doing is going to put them in danger, then I do need to go to somebody. Now, for example, you said that, okay, people may have thoughts of suicide, like you're saying, okay, and you can deal with that. But if if somebody kind of indicates something, that you need to take people seriously, okay. So you need to encourage them to get the help they need, or if they're having, if they can get hurt or killed, you definitely need to help bring them to the right person to prevent that, if it's their parents, for example, or even if you have to call the police. Okay? But you need to, from the beginning, discuss these ground rules with the people. Know that you're not just going to blab things, but if it's something that's dangerous to them, you are morally obligated to reveal that. Because if something happened and you didn't, how would you feel? If we can prevent something, it's very important. In the medical field, there's the HIPAA laws. They can't discuss your condition, your treatment. So I'm trying. without your permission. So I'm kind of relating that we need to respect their privacy and let's see. Okay, let's take a break because we've already church. Okay, so we need to have faith, we need to be credible, we need to be available. People need to be able to trust us. Okay. And we need to show people acceptance. We need to meet people where they're at in order to get them where we're going. Now, often you might work with someone that should be farther along in life than where they are, and they're subverting their own progress just by their bad habits, their poor behavior, and yes, they should be farther along in the recovery process or in just being able to handle things. But if we're dealing with them thinking that you're not getting them there. We need to recognize that, yeah, maybe somebody should have been able to pick themselves by their own bootstraps. But sometimes they need us to give them a push to get up out of the hole. And so when they trust us and we accept them that they're lagging behind or they're in this hole, they're in this deep ditch, just like they were drunk and drove off into the ditch. Well, yeah, you shouldn't have gotten there, but how are we going to be sitting there? Oh, you shouldn't have gotten there, or we're going to help them get out and help move them forward. And sometimes we need to walk them forward, that just with their own discipline or their own skills, they're not able to get there by themselves. So judging them for what they're doing wrong or where they should be isn't going to help to move them forward. So we need to accept them where they're at and not expect them to come up to us, but start where they're at now and help give them the skills and the support to get where they need to be going. And that is very important in a recovery process, right? If you have addictive behaviors.
Right.
I mean, they've gotten themselves into their own trouble, but if they want to get out, we're going to be there, okay? So we need to accept people as they are, where they are, and we're serving people of all races, all creeds, and all religions. And it's not always easy to learn how they act in their environment or their culture or subculture, because sometimes our experiences limit us to this block. So if we can't relate to them, then it's important to try to find somebody else that we can break through. For example, if you just don't understand an Eastern culture, there's a lot of different races and nationalities in the United States. You just don't understand how it works, and you just can't then find a way to decline, to say, I need to find somebody that I feel unequipped. That's a good way to say it. I feel unequipped to meet your needs, but I would like to help you find somebody that can help you right in a situation for you. Because we don't always understand why the philosophies people have. and we're just not able to deal with it. But that's not, you know, that's a little bit different than not accepting them. It's just, we just are unequipped. And the more experience we have, the more diverse groups of people we're able to touch. Okay? And I think understanding people's sensitivities is, even if they're irrational and illogical, don't make sense, why people are getting upset and offended, but there's a wound there. Right. Understanding that, you know, people are hurt. So, looking at this, a previous recording, I talked about a man I know whose brother is homeless. And he has tried to help his brother. He has reached out to him, given him things, done different things, and it doesn't do any good. If you try to get him in a house, help get him work, give him money, he just goes back to the same old patterns. And he just has gotten to the point where there's just nothing he can do for him. And I think it's sad, because you may want to help somebody, but if they don't want to help themselves, there's nothing you can do. But in this man's case, he's just so angry at his brother. Because to him there's no logical reason why he should be in this situation. But he lets it spill out over to other people that are homeless. Can you understand that? We don't think that it may happen to us, but his anger, and there are people that are in situations that haven't done it to themselves, really, and some people that do. But we need, if we were this brother in the Lord, we would need to work on accepting other people in the same situation. Maybe someone closes the door in your face and won't do anything for themselves, but you still need to just the way they are, accept them, and be able to reach out and respect the next person in that same situation. I think that helps me to deal with and to look at each person with dignity and respect, even if they don't behave themselves in a manner that's worthy of respect or dignity, is that I know God created him, God created her, and he loves them in their broken and degraded state. And Jesus paid that same price for them as he did for me, and that gives them the value.
Right.
Whether they're worthy of it or not, that does give them a value. And it's hard. It's hard to not treat people like they're not equal. And you see that often, like very wealthy people, or very gifted, intelligent people, or very athletic people. They think they're on a bigger, higher level than all of us mere mortals. So when I think that I'm pretty, I look at the ones that are looking down on my ordinariness, so that I'm not looking down
on them.
on someone on a different socioeconomic level or education level or, we do. We think.
I'm gonna go back to hurt people.
Okay. Showing genuine interest. Okay. I've heard it said across many different platforms that chaplaincy is a ministry of presence. And it's can never be said enough, just being there.
Personal.
Personal?
Personal. Make it personal.
Make it personal.
Personal.
When I am interested in what you're saying, how do I act? That's right. I'm looking at you. How many times have we gone somewhere and we're talking to somebody and I've got something else to do or gives to somebody and I'm looking for somebody that's there to give them something, and I am listening to them, but I'm not showing that I'm interested in what they're saying. Because I've got something else on my mind and I have to hand this off to somebody or arrange this encounter with somebody else for later on in the day or in the week. But I need to show them that I'm interested. And we can do that in a number of different ways. We're going to talk a little bit about it in communication skills. Maintain a sincere desire to minister on a personal level. Okay? Yeah, we're farther along than you thought.
I didn't see that part.
They're not a statistic. They're not a notch on a belt. They're not a number. They're not a cog in a big machine. A lot of times you might, if you had any interaction or exposure to people in the medical profession, often you're just a number on a chart, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're this diagnosis. How does that make you feel?
But you're not important.
You do.
Yeah, you're not important. And so we have to, when we're with somebody, we need to pay attention to that person, even if there's other things going on. When I have an appointment, I either put my phone away if the time is not a factor, or I at least put it on silent. Okay? Because that person, unless something is an emergency, has my attention for that slot of time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like a lot of times you might be at dinner in a group and different people are flicking through their phones, or previously you might see in old television shows how a man and his wife are at breakfast and he's behind the paper. Or they're sitting in front of a TV and someone's trying to talk and they're paying attention to a football game or some program. You try to get their attention and you make a better window than a door than a window, right? But we need to show interest in the person and what they're saying. So there's little details, right? Details about their lives that I try to remember if I'm going to be seeing them again, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes your encounter with somebody, you're dealing with something, is just that one moment. But if you're going on with somebody else, that knowing their dog's name, remembering some details about them shows an interest, that you're listening, that that they're more than just a check mark on your schedule. Okay. When you're being there for them, you're showing them that they're not alone. Because often we feel alone in this world, even in the midst of a group of people, even in our relationships. So by paying attention to them, you're showing them that they're important. We need to be tactful and considerate. And sometimes we misstep with our words. We don't know that we say things in an ungracious way, or a kind of crude way, or just not real smooth, right? And or a tone of voice. But I have a habit of calling people, not if they're a lady, calling people sir. I don't call ladies sir, though. But if someone is waiting, I'm showing them some consideration.
Respect.
And respect. Trying to be on time is showing them some consideration as well. When we're showing godly compassion and understanding and love, we're showing interest, a genuine interest, that they're not the same as the person next to them. They're not the same as the person you talked to yesterday. They have individual needs, likes, dislikes. Remembering how somebody takes their coffee. Little things. Okay? Personal responsibilities of a chaplain. You need to have a good sense of who you are and who you are in Christ. When you remember that God created you and designed you particularly with your weaknesses and strengths, then you have a stability and a confidence. And particularly in some of the letters of Paul, he writes a lot about who we are in relation to Jesus, our position and our standing with God. And because we have that, we can convey that to the other people. Because that, when we feel that establishment, then we're standing on a firm foundation, and we can help them. But if I'm off balance, I don't have that stability to help somebody else. Okay? If I'm standing on one foot, trying not to fall, am I going to be able to hold somebody else up? Not very effectively. We're both going to be falling over.
Not too much.
I mean, I may be able to keep them from falling off of the mountain, but we're both going to be falling somewhere. We may both tumble over, but I'm not going to be able to help them stand, right? So we need to establish and help settle some things in ourselves. And the more established we are, the more we can help other people. And that doesn't mean we don't go through a crisis. It doesn't mean that we're always on the top of our game, that we always have the answers, that we always feel secure, that we always, already said have the answer, but we're not always walking in the wisdom that we're trying to convey to people. And sometimes we blurt things out. Another thing is we need to be responsible for our own physical, emotional, and spiritual health. We need to take care of our bodies.
Mhm.
We need to take care of our minds, and we need to take care of our spirits. We need to give we're a three-part being. We're not just a lump of clay here. We have emotions, and then we have an inner man that's made in the image and likeness of God. So we need to develop and strengthen all those things. How do we strengthen our bodies? Well,
Eat healthy, eat good,
eat
eat healthy.
eat good foods.
Mhm.
We need to rest, get the right amount of rest. Everybody needs a different amount of sleep. You know, I sleep less than my husband, but, you know, so you need to have proper nutrition, you need to rest, and you need to have times when you step back.
Mhm.
Jesus often separated himself away from the crowds,
Mhm.
and he went to pray.
Mhm.
One lady did a talk, I don't know if it was last year, on stress, one of the chaplains, on one of our seminars.
Mhm.
And one of the things she said is, it's important to get away a couple of times a year and just get back. Just unhook from all your responsibilities and just let your hair down, just relax. It could be going to a park, it could be going away for a couple of days, it could be just sitting in your place with some nice music and just quiet and relax, but you need to keep your stress level down. Because as you're working with all these people,
Right.
this stuff is kind of building up on can build up on your shoulders.
Mhm.
One of the highest suicide rates in professions is among psychiatrists.
Hmm.
Because that's all coming in. So we need to clear our minds from these things. And when you're trying to work out somebody's problems, I mean, sometimes you work in your sleep,
Your mind's gone.
your mind's going, trying to resolve some things, trying to plan things, or, and like when my husband's got something going that he's working on, a project or something, he doesn't sleep well, or if he has to get somewhere early the next day, he has a meeting or has to go somewhere, if you're catching a flight, and because his body wakes him up so that he's ready, and he doesn't get the rest he needs. So we need to step back. One lady I know that's a social worker, you know, she would deal with a number of different cases every day. And she realized that her workload was such that she needed to step back from being in children's ministry for a little bit of time because of all the demands that were being put on
Mhm.
her emotionally
Mhm.
from dealing with these different
Mhm.
families.
Mhm.
Okay? If I'm teaching children every day, that wears on you.
Mhm.
You're giving of yourself, so you need to get rest. You need to replenish your mind, and you need that calming in you.
Mhm.
The same thing with parents of young children. There's so much activity, and you're just doing everything for them that you're not taking care of yourself.
Right.
But if you're not taking care of yourself, then you're not going to be equipped and in
Quick to do it.
to help the other people. Because if I'm all worn down and I'm coming to you to try to help you in your stressful or debilitating situation, then I'm just not alert enough and strong enough to give everything that from within me and the resources that God can pour through me to the other person. So it's important to separate yourself. You talked about exercise. Well, you know, there's a certain amount of physical movement that we need to do. And I don't mean that everybody needs to lift weights, but we need to keep moving. If we're sitting at a desk all day, we need to get up and walk around so that the blood flows. But we do need to move our bodies, because if we're not, or after you're 40, you lose half a pound, a woman loses a half a pound of muscle mass per year.
Oh, that's why I'm having so much problems.
If you don't do something about it. So what do you have to do to
Yeah. I go to the gym 3 times a week.
you have to do something with
Right,
weights
right,
or resistance
right.
to keep your muscles. Otherwise, they're just going to disappear.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with being heavy looking
No.
or skinny. I remember
It's a human.
going up to this one lady, and I put my hand on her. I think it was, I don't touched her leg or something, and it was so mushy.
Ah.
Because there's no muscle tone.
Uh-huh.
She was older, but because you don't move, then you're going to lose the muscle tone. And so it has nothing to do, it was like, oh, she, any muscle tone, then you lose strength. So you're not going to be able to stand up, you're not going to be, you know, I mean, as you're getting older.
Yeah.
Or if you're in the hospital and you're immobile for a while, you need to
Upgrade to get back to normal.
right, and it can take a long time.
It sure can.
So that's a good thing for you to know when you're dealing with, like, perhaps elderly people that are just sitting there. They need to, even if they're not jumping and, you know, running around, you need to do things for your range of motion. You need to lift. I always tell my daughter, I'm doing this so that I can lift my grocery bags when I'm old. Because if you want to carry my grocery bags, that's fine, but if you're not there and I can't lift them up, well, you know. So we also have to, we have to take care of our bodies, and we have to know what gifts God has given us and where He's placed us. And we need to recognize our own limitations. Okay, I can't do everything, I can't solve everybody's problem. And I only have a limited amount of knowledge. Of course, we keep trying to train and go to classes and find out more things about how to help people and get more tools so that we know better how to assist and move people forward. But if I don't know, if I know I don't have the answer for somebody, I need to find somebody, right, who does. Check out somebody else, consult somebody else. If that person doesn't want to go to somebody else, you know, sometimes you have to refer people to other people. But you can there's always people around you that you can find resources and information and has experience. So that's why it's good to be part of a group, because there's other people that have had experiences or have resources or answers that have gone through something that we don't have. We don't want to be a know-it-all. That can be dangerous for us and the people we're helping. We call them clients. Okay. Assume responsibility for building relationships. Okay. this is something that we can indicate for somebody else. But, because a lot of times people say, well, they didn't say hi to me, or they don't do this, or nobody pays any attention to me. But we can't tell them to take the first step if we're not taking a step.
Mhm.
Right?
That's right.
So I need to be the peacemaker. I need to be the one stepping forward. Okay? I need to be the one that, the first one to say hi. Right?
Mhm.
Okay? When we were in Belgium and new people would come to the church, I would tell my one daughter, as a teenager, to go say hi to this new kid that came. Male or female, it didn't matter. And as a young person, you know, you don't want to go make somebody welcome. You're kind of like insecure and thinking about your own whatevers. But that person that comes in is alone, they're unfamiliar, so we need to try to make people comfortable.
Mhm.
We need to be the ones that,
Extends ourselves.
it says exact words that I was going to use, to reach out to the person,
Mhm.
okay? And that goes with our friends and relatives that, you know, to make the call to say, hi, how are you doing? Not wait for
Mhm.
your brother.
She hasn't called me, and I'm not going to call her because I called the last time.
Right, right.
Uh,
And when we're trying to help somebody,
Uh-huh.
okay, when we're talking about these responsibilities to ourselves,
Right.
that's to enrich and strengthen our lives. But when we're dealing with somebody else, then we have to not assume that the person is going to come to us when they need help.
Mhm.
Once you've established that contact. Now, I try not to stick my nose in other people's business, you know, where I don't have an entrance or authority. I mean, you may say, well, no, that person over there is doing something wrong, and you're not going to be, you know, I'm not just going to take it upon myself to say, you know, you really need to do something about this, unless I have a relationship with that person. But if I've been working with a person, a client, and I haven't heard from them in a while,
Right.
you know, do that follow-up, reach out.
Right.
What's going on with you? I haven't heard from you in a while. I send less cards than I used to, but I always used to send a lot of cards to people for birthdays, for when they're sick, I'm thinking about you.
Mhm.
And that goes a long way to building a relationship. Now, you know, well, I was always overseas, and so, you know, sending letters and things was the way of communicating. My grandmother had this humongous Christmas card list. You know, every year, people that from all over the country that, you know, had moved, or she'd moved, or they moved on to different parts of their lives in different areas, but she would, you know, send those cards out every Christmas to this person that she was close to back then, you know. So, you know, now we have texts, people do emails, there's other different social media ways to reaching out. So I often, on Facebook, you know, you get these things that today's somebody's birthday. And instead of just clicking on the thing and typing happy birthday, I go to the site TodaySpring, e-cards.
Oh, okay.
And it has, you know, a little postcard kind of thing with little nice sayings, and send it to them. Just a little bit out of the ordinary.
Cute.
So, collaborate with others in the community who can help you to help others. Okay? You know, there's a proverb that says, iron sharpens iron. And so a friend sharpens the countenance or the aspect of a friend, working together, we're stronger than working apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can help you minister to somebody, and you can help me minister to somebody. Okay, so I think that's it for today, okay? So, for the homework, okay, you need to read the first chapter in Ethics 101 and read chapter 1 in the Crisis and Trauma book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, I mean, you're pretty far in the faith, so, I mean, if you don't have time, you can it says to start reading the faith, because I already gave the book to you before, and you already started reading, so you can put that back. And then there's week 1 homework questions. If you see, in the book it says the homework in your manual to remind you. The homework questions, you read.
Homework week 1, what happened to business?
Okay, so after that page, okay, that's the homework for this week. And then there's 4 questions on the next page for you to answer. Now you can answer, there's not a whole lot of space on that, so you probably have to either answer it on the back or write it on a separate sheet of paper. Okay? So are there any questions or comments about the material that we talked about this evening? Is there something that needs to be gone in greater depth that wasn't quite clear, or you want some more information on?
No, everything was, it's a lot to take in.
It's a lot to
but,
take in.
I feel like it was very helpful. Makes me want to get even closer and be more helpful and just be more considerate, and yeah.
Okay. There's there's a lot of different areas where we can be effective as chaplains. So we think one lady came to the class and she wanted to work as a chaplain with police.
Mm-hmm.
And during her, we weren't able to get her into the police have a lot of legal qualifications, and so you cannot just do an internship with them. To ride with them, to work with them, you have to already be a chaplain.
Right.
So she wasn't able to do that or get experience in that way with a police force. So she started working with young men, with a ministry that ministered to young men that had gotten in trouble with the law and they were detained. And it was only a few weeks. I mean, she would go like once a week or something like that, and they would visit and minister to these young guys. And it was only a couple weeks before she said, I love this. This is where I want to be.
Wow.
And it wasn't where she thought she was going to be, but at this point, she doesn't want to do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we start off going in one direction, and God kind of redirects us to something. And you know what? He equips us for what He's got for us.